Some wounds don't bleed loud. They just sit under your skin and burn every time someone smiles like nothing happened. Picture this: a wedding ballroom dressed in flowers and champagne, and the one person who's supposed to protect you steps close and hits you. Then he calls you his biggest failure, a mistake. And the room laughs, not because it's funny, but because laughing is safer than choosing a side. And that's where we start today. Not to cheer for anyone's downfall, not to hand out verdicts like we're above it all. Just to walk into one night that cracked a life in half and notice what it reveals about power silence and the kind of family that only loves you when you stay small. Sometimes the hardest losses aren't the ones that end us. They're the ones that expose the truth we kept surviving around. Because right after that slap, right when they thought they'd erased him, his secret wife walked in. Not with drama, with calm, with receipts. And the people who were laughing a second ago went pale. So take a breath, stay with me, and let's go back to the moment everything changed. Before tell you how that night turned into the day my family lost everything I need to know. I'm not saying this into the void. If you're here with me, just comment listening or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes even one small reply makes it easier to say the hardest parts out loud. Thank you. My name is Riven, and if stories about betrayal, survival, and finally taking your life back speak to you, hit subscribe, because I'm going to tell you exactly how I went from the family joke to the man they begged for mercy. And now, let me tell you everything. The moment I stepped into the resort in Asheville, it felt like the building itself knew I didn't belong. The doorman greeted me with the same smile he likely gave every guest, but when the Lockharts saw me walk in, I could see the subtle shift. Their eyes scanned me like I was a stain on their pressed linens. I told myself I was just here to play a part, to show up, sit quietly, and check the box labeled family. Nothing more. The rehearsal dinner was exactly what you'd expect from old money, trying to look effortlessly charming: towering floral arrangements, low-lit chandeliers, jazz quartet humming in the background, waitstaff in black and white gliding like shadows. It was the kind of elegance that screamed price tags instead of warmth. I wasn't at the head table, God no. But I wasn't with the catering staff either. I'd been placed at a purgatory table near the corner, a silent reminder that I belonged to neither world. Just close enough to see, far enough to forget. Then came the toast. My father, Caldwell Lockhart, stood with his bourbon glass pride puffing out his chest like a peacock. To Beau he said, "My pride and joy. Our legacy." He rattled off Beau's achievements like a resume he had memorized. Graduated top of his class, took the investment firm to new heights, and now marrying into the Holloways. That's a man who understands responsibility. Applause followed. Hollis Holloway gave a stiff nod of approval. My mother smiled tightly. Then Caldwell's gaze drifted to me. And of course, he paused just long enough to draw every eye in the room. Riven, my firstborn, the free spirit, always following the beat of his own drum. He lifted his glass lazily toward me, lips twitching in something that wasn't quite a smile, wherever that beat may be. Laughter broke out. The kind that starts polite, but grows teeth. Someone asked loudly, "So what are you doing now, Riven?" I gave a brief answer. Working. They wanted more. I didn't give it. This wasn't curiosity, it was sport. After the toasts, I felt a gentle hand on my arm. My mother. She pulled me into the hallway just outside the banquet room, where the music felt muffled and the carpet swallowed our steps. "Please," she whispered, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. Beau deserves a perfect day." I looked at her, really looked at her. What if he's not the one who starts something? She hesitated. "Your father is intense, but you know how to handle him. You always have." And there it was. I wasn't being asked to keep the peace, I was being assigned the role of scapegoat to preserve appearances. Beau approached me later, grinning for the crowd, but his words were hollow. "Make sure you're on time tomorrow," he said, his eyes never really meeting mine. "They've got you seated where you won't block the cameras. And stay away from the mic, all right?" I nodded, biting down hard on everything I wanted to say. Not here. Not yet. I noticed how Hollis Holloway kept glancing at me like I was a problem to be managed, not a future in-law. And Maris, his daughter Beau's fiancée, smiled politely, but her eyes told the truth. She didn't want me in her wedding photos or her story. I was a crack in the porcelain. As the night wound down, I caught the wedding planner whispering urgently to the venue's security team. One phrase stuck out like a flashing red light. "If there's any trouble with the brother, remove him discreetly." I didn't react, not outwardly, but something inside me turned to ice. They were planning for my humiliation. Back in my room, I tossed my jacket over a chair and checked my phone. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Tomorrow they'll hit you. In front of everyone." And that's not even the worst part. I didn't sleep much. I kept staring at the message, reading it over and over again, dissecting every word. Someone knew what was coming. Someone who didn't want it to happen. And they were trying to warn me. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not even Beau. I needed to be sure. So I started watching. Listening. Morning came dressed in sunshine and lies. The resort buzzed with wedding staff, florists, hair and makeup teams, and guests sipping lattes by the fountains. Everyone pretending this was the happiest day of someone's life. I walked past the seating chart displayed near the main hall. My name had been moved subtly but intentionally from a family table to a seat near the side exit, next to the speakers, far from the altar. I asked the wedding planner, who blinked twice before murmuring, "It was a request from your family." I filed that away. Position me by the door. Easier to drag me out when the time came. Wandering near the AV booth, I caught a voice I recognized, my cousin Blaine. He was sharp, jittery, on the phone with someone. "If he gets near the mic, it's over. The Holloways will pull the plug. Just make sure the mic is locked down." So this wasn't about family. This was about image, about deals. Suddenly I wasn't a brother. I was a risk factor. I saw Caldwell later tucked in a corner near the back offices, pacing and hissing into his phone. "No, damn it, you said the signatures would be done. I can't have this come out today. We'll finalize after the board meets. No, don't forward anything. Paper only." There was a crack in the armor. Something financial, something urgent. And I was the distraction. The cover. I cornered my mother near the dressing rooms, tried one more time. "Mom, do you know what they're planning?" Her lips thinned. "Your father's under a lot of stress. That's not an answer." She sighed. "Just don't provoke him, please." She knew. She'd always known. And she chose silence. Chose him. Another buzz on my phone. Another message from the same unknown number. A screenshot of a planning doc security briefing. Remove RL if necessary. Approved by CL. It wasn't paranoia. It was logistics. I started laying groundwork. I turned on the voice recorder in my jacket pocket, kept it running as I moved through public spaces. I confirmed with the venue manager that the ballroom cameras stored footage for up to 72 hours. Then I sent one message. Just one. To the only person I trusted. "If anything happens, don't come out. Wait for the signal." I didn't say who. I didn't explain. But the wheels were turning. Later, as I passed Beau on his way to take photos with the groomsmen, he leaned close and muttered, "Just smile, keep your head down, and we'll all get through this." Get through this, as if I was the obstacle. As if my presence was a burden. I understood then. They weren't just trying to exclude me. They were trying to erase me. To ensure I existed in no part of the narrative except as a stain quickly wiped clean. And they thought I was alone. Right before the ceremony began, another text came through. "They won't stop at hitting you. He's going to say it into the mic, that you were a mistake. And after the ceremony, they'll hand you something to sign. Something that'll cut you out for good." From the moment I stepped into the ceremonial garden that afternoon, I knew they'd written me out of the story. I wasn't given a seat with the family. Instead, a staff member led me to a lonely row of chairs by the far hedge, away from the photographer's lens, out of the frame. I was told, as if it were protocol, "This is per the family's request." The wedding planner didn't meet my eyes when she said it. I stood there, letting the hum of small talk and the cello in the distance blur together. I didn't fight it. I didn't even frown. In fact, I laughed softly to myself. Not out of humor, but because it was so thorough. Even in the photos they'd hang in their homes, I wouldn't exist. I wouldn't just be forgotten. I'd be deleted. While Beau and Maris posed with their pristine smiles beneath the floral archway, I lingered near the garden exit. Just close enough to hear just far enough to be invisible. That's how I heard the second knot begin to tighten. From inside the family waiting room, just beyond the hedges, voices carried. I couldn't see them, but I knew them. I don't want any surprises. Hollis Holloway's voice snapped like a closing briefcase. We need the Lockhart image clean. No scandals, no liabilities, no strays. My father's reply was short, gruff, decisive. I'll handle the boy. Not Riven. Not my son. The boy. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was being paranoid. That was the moment I knew I wasn't a guest here. I was a problem to be solved. I found Beau near the side corridor, sipping champagne and shaking hands like the polished southern air he'd been groomed to be. When I tapped his shoulder, he turned too slowly. We need to talk. He forced a tight smile, one reserved for awkward relatives and inconvenient truths. What, Riv? What's the plan? Beau. Let him go up there and say whatever he wants while I stand here waiting for the shoe to drop. He didn't answer. Do you even know what he's going to say? His mouth twitched. Don't do this. Do what. He finally looked at me, blank, tired, cold. Don't be selfish. This is my future. You showing up and making it about you. That's not fair. I stared at him like I was seeing a stranger. But I wasn't. I was seeing exactly the brother I'd grown up with. Beau had always taken the easier path, nod, smile, stay out of the blast radius. Only now he was lighting the match. Is that why you let him call in security, so you could tell yourself you didn't throw the punch? He didn't respond. Just adjusted his cufflink and walked away. That was the last conversation I had with my brother before the world shifted. Back inside, I found my mother waiting for me in the hallway like she'd rehearsed the timing. Her dress was pale blue, elegant, modest. Her voice was low and urgent. Riven, please don't respond to him today, no matter what he says. So you know he's planning something. She blinked, and in that blink I saw everything. Mama. She looked away. You know exactly what he's going to say. She pressed her lips together. Just let him have his moment, all right. Don't ruin this for Beau. There it was again. That quiet, well-dressed cruelty disguised as peacekeeping. You think I'm the threat, I said. Not him. Please, honey. Just let today go. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Past the flower arrangements, past the crystal glasses and gold-trimmed place cards, past the polished shoes of men who would pretend not to see what they saw. In a waiting room near the ballroom entrance, Caldwell paced like a wolf in a cage. I watched from a distance as he downed another bourbon jaw, set tight nostrils flaring. He checked his watch, barked at a staff member about timing, and muttered something about getting this over with. He was building to something. I'd seen that tension before in our kitchen in the backyard, and the way he always called pain discipline. He didn't hit in secret. He hit when he wanted control. And tonight, control was slipping. That's when I saw it. A cream-colored envelope on the side table, half tucked beneath a clipboard. My name scrawled across the front in someone's hurried handwriting. A sticky note attached, RL sign after reception. I slid it halfway open and caught a glimpse of legal jargon: waiver, renouncement, irrevocable estate interests. They were going to make it official. After this public execution, they'd offer me a pen. Frame it as damage control. Frame it as my choice. I closed the flap and placed it back exactly as I found it. And then I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and typed 6 words to a contact whose name I hadn't spoken aloud all week. If they call my name, it's time. No context, no emotion, just a trigger. Let them have their theater. Let them cue the spotlight. I'd chosen the moment the curtain would fall. I stood just outside the ballroom now, listening to the crowd inside, the music shifting from jazz to something more ceremonial. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose in polite waves. My father's voice, familiar and venom-laced, cut through the murmur like a knife. Let's raise a glass. To my sons. The doors opened. Light spilled out. Caldwell's hand gripped my shoulder tight as iron. Tonight, he whispered, I'll show them exactly who you are. And when I'm done, you'll sign. You'll be gone. I stepped inside. Not like a guest, like a man walking into his own trial. They say there's a moment right before a train crashes when everything slows down. The wind stills. The sound stretches. That's what it felt like walking into that ballroom. Caldwell stood near the microphone. The spotlight above him turned his silver hair gold. He was smiling the way only a man with a weapon can smile. Behind him, Bo and Maris sat at the head table surrounded by crystal glasses in curated perfection. The crowd quieted as he raised his hand, and in that breathless lull the noose tightened. I'd like to say something about my sons. He let the word sons hang there for a moment too long. Bo, he continued, has always made me proud. He followed the right path. He built a future. He carries the Lockhart name with integrity. The room clapped a soft swell of polite admiration. And then there's Riven. My name cracked through the air like a bullet. My spine locked. Riven, he said, turning to face me directly, come up here, son. This wasn't invitation. This was performance. I didn't move. I didn't have to. He didn't wait. This one, Caldwell said into the mic, gesturing toward me, has always walked his own road. Some call it freedom. I call it failure. The crowd shifted. A few awkward chuckles. A few heads turned to gauge how others were reacting. He chose rebellion. He chose mediocrity. He chose to be a stain on the Lockhart legacy. I met his gaze. I didn't flinch. And yet he said, voice rising, he shows up today. He demands attention. Like a stray dog scratching at the door of a house he walked out of years ago. Some people laughed, others froze. But nobody stood up. Let me be clear, he continued. This wedding is not a place for charity. It is a celebration of what's right, of who's right. Riven, you are a mistake. He said it slowly, like carving it into stone. And then he stepped toward me. Fast. His fist came before anyone realized what was happening. A sharp blow to my chest. Not enough to knock me down, but enough to take the breath out of me. I staggered but kept my feet. The room gasped. A glass shattered somewhere. But no one moved. No one stopped him. Not Eden, who stepped forward and then back, whispering, Enough, Caldwell. It's Bo's day. Not Bo, who stared at his plate like the centerpiece mattered more than his brother's dignity. Caldwell's voice boomed again. Security. Two men appeared, instantly flanking me. He's disrupting the celebration. Remove him. That was the cue. Blaine, or maybe someone else from the back room, appeared near the side entrance, envelope in hand. Let's make this easy, Riven, he murmured. Just sign. Walk away. Be done. I looked at the security team, then at my father. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I said clearly enough for every microphone and camera in the room. All right. Let me go outside. And as they moved to guide me toward the door, I reached into my pocket with one hand and pressed send. One word. Now. Behind me, the ballroom noise dimmed as something shifted in the hallway. Footsteps. Firm. Coordinated. I saw the flicker of black suits. Not hotel security. Not guests. This was something else. Something they hadn't planned for. I didn't smile. I didn't turn. I just let them push me toward the threshold, knowing what waited on the other side. They thought they were dragging me out of the frame, but what they'd really done was open the door. The moment Serafina stepped into the ballroom, everything changed. I was still stumbling back from the force of Caldwell's blow, security already moving in to remove me like some drunken intruder when the air shifted. The chatter died, the gasps began, and then the silence. Not because anyone asked for it, because the energy in the room had just been claimed by someone who didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. She wasn't just beautiful, she was terrifying. In that white pantsuit and sleek black coat draped over one shoulder like a queen of a hostile empire, she walked through the crowd with the calm of someone who already owned the place. And maybe she did. Get him out of Caldwell started, but his words clipped off mid-bark. Because she wasn't walking toward him. She was walking toward me. Her heels echoed against the marble as she brushed past the trembling wedding coordinator, past the guard still holding my arms like I was a threat. Then, soft and steady, she said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My husband. That word broke across the room like a bottle against a ship's hull. A new launch, a new direction, a total shift. I blinked, unsure if I'd imagined it, until her hand reached for mine, not to pull, not to drag me away, to steady me. To the manager, she said, already turning her head. I'll be handling the legal ramifications. I trust you have the footage. The poor man just nodded. And then she turned back to Caldwell, still frozen in a blend of disbelief and barely veiled rage. You just struck your son, she said, cool and clipped. In front of hundreds of witnesses, including me and our legal team. She motioned slightly with her head, and out from the periphery stepped Tessa Klein, our attorney, with 2 more members of her firm behind her, briefcases already in hand. Don't even think about denying it, Tessa said, eyes sharp, voice hard. We've got it on 4 angles. The room began to murmur. The photographers lowered their cameras. Guests looked around, unsure if they were at a wedding or about to witness a televised arrest. Then came the recognition. Someone near the bar whispered it first. That's Serafina Vale. Another Vale Dominion, wait, the Vale Dominion. And that was it. The room shifted again, from gasps to silence to something heavier. Dread. It wasn't money that made people nervous around her. It was power, institutional, quiet, untouchable. I felt her squeeze my hand slightly. We can go, she said under her breath. Right now. Leave them here in the ashes. And God, I wanted to. But then I looked around. Looked at them, my brother straightening his suit like nothing happened. My mother refusing to meet my eye, my father still clenching his fists as if he was owed the right to hit me again. If I walked out now, they'd rewrite the story by morning. He snapped, caused a scene, made the wedding all about himself. They'd say it with ease, with conviction, like they always had. No, I told her quietly. Not yet. Serafina gave a slow nod. Tessa stepped forward and set the briefcase on the edge of the wedding party's head table. Hollis Holloway stiffened at the sight of her. He recognized her. Hell, he might have been one of her junior associates 10 years ago. We're filing the final notice here for the sake of transparency, she said. Vale Dominion has finalized its acquisition of controlling shares in Lockhart Capital Group as of 7:01 this morning. The papers were lifted, stamped, notarized. I didn't even need to see them, I knew what they were. I'd watched her build this play brick by brick over the last year. I just hadn't known she'd pull the trigger today. Or maybe I had. And now Caldwell was realizing it too. His face had turned to stone. But it wasn't just the buyout. It was what came next. Tessa pulled a second folder. And for full legal clarity, this is the original contract signed by Caldwell Lockhart, dated last September, transferring 19% of his personal shares in a private sale to cover damages in a sealed civil case. Case number 4782AC. My father's face turned white, stark, like someone had cut the power behind his eyes. And the incident that led to that case, Tessa added, her voice slicing through the tension, involved an employee at one of his subsidiaries who accused Mr. Lockhart of misconduct and retaliation. The settlement was significant. The silence, bought. Gasps again. But this time they weren't for me. They were for him. I looked up into my father's eyes, and for the first time in my life I didn't see fire or fury. I saw fear. That shook me more than the slap. Because this man who'd spent decades controlling a legacy with an iron grip, suddenly looked small, breakable. The guests began to shift. Hollis Holloway was now whispering with his daughter, her lips twisted in concern. Maris turned sharply to Bo, eyes wide. What the hell is going on? Bo said nothing, because he didn't know. Because for once he wasn't in control either. I was the mistake, I said, soft but loud enough to carry. That's what he told me. right before he hit me. Eyes turned again. And you laughed. I added, my gaze locked on Bo and my mother now. You laughed because this family made it a sport to humiliate me. But let's be clear, this wasn't new. This was just the first time you got caught on camera. I paused. And then, the last time you'll ever tell my story for me. Serafina leaned in quiet. Do you want this to be the end? I stared at the shaken crowd. The ashes were starting to fall, but the fire hadn't fully taken yet. No, I said. I want them to live in the truth. She nodded once, then turned to her team behind the scenes and said one word. Stage it. And as they moved, dragging out equipment, rolling cases, plugging in cords, I took one last look at the ballroom, at the broken little kingdom I'd grown up inside. Then I walked out into the light to finish what we started. Chuang 6 tiep knowing I doi tiep tuk strong tin han salvi gioi hanki 2. The stage went up fast. In 5 minutes, the hotel's red-carpeted entrance transformed from a photo op for influencers and wedding guests into a makeshift courtroom cordoned off by velvet ropes lit by white lights and centered on a mic stand that looked like it had been waiting for this very reckoning. I stood in front of it. Serafina stood off to the side, not in front of me, not shielding me. She gave me the floor. The story was mine now. I gripped the mic and took one breath. They called me a mistake, I said. And the silence was sharp. They called me a failure, a disappointment. They laughed when I was hit. They laughed because to them I was nothing more than a punchline at my brother's wedding. I scanned the crowd. Some were still in wedding attire, heels crooked and the concrete ties loosened. Some were strangers, tourists who stopped to watch. Some were reporters already filming. I didn't care who they were. I cared that they saw it. That moment, that violence, that was not a family dispute. That was public humiliation. And I've had enough. Tessa stepped forward beside me and held up the first document. This is a court-approved restraining order, she said. Filed 48 hours ago, processed this morning. It prohibits Caldwell Lockhart, Eden Lockhart, and Bo Lockhart from making contact with Riven Lockhart or Serafina Vale within 100 yards of their home business or public engagements. I took it from her and read it out loud. And just like that, I wasn't the kid begging to be believed anymore. I was a man with law behind me. Evidence. Power. The murmurs started. Then Tessa nodded again, and the screens lit up. 4 panels, 4 different angles. Time-stamped. Clean audio. My father pacing in his office, voice low and sharp. You will sign that document or I swear to God you'll wish you weren't born. My mother whispering to Eden. If we give him even a sliver, he'll drag us all down. Bo laughing at a rehearsal dinner, drink in hand. Don't worry, he's not in any of the wedding shots. We made sure of that. There was no rage in the crowd now, just shame. People covered their mouths, shifted uncomfortably, moved back. Then Caldwell roared. This is manipulation. He broke into our systems. Those clips are doctored. He stepped forward, but the bodyguards blocked him fast. His face turned purple. Tell them how you got those clips, he shouted. Tessa didn't flinch. Every clip was pulled legally, from publicly accessible system security footage owned by this venue or devices owned by Ms. Vale. We've filed digital trace records for every timestamp. You want to argue? Let's do it in court. Another murmur rolled across the onlookers. That's when Bo cracked. This is blackmail. You bought shares in secret, you rigged the whole thing. Serafina raised an eyebrow. Welcome to capitalism. And that shut him up. But Caldwell wasn't done. He lunged not at me but at the screen, like destroying the evidence would erase the truth. One of Serafina's men caught him mid-stride and held him firm. The hotel's security team was already moving in. Someone pulled out their phone and shouted, "It's streaming now." I felt the shift, the irreversible one. This wasn't a family fight anymore. This was a headline. This was proof. No one could close the door now and lie about what happened inside. And just when I thought the chapter was closing, Serafina touched my arm gently. "We need to talk," she said. She pulled me to the side near the black SUV waiting at the curb. The sun was almost setting now, and shadows danced across the pavement. She handed me a sealed envelope. "I wanted you to have this," after she said. "I didn't want it to color your decision to speak up." I took it. It was heavier than I expected. My name was handwritten across the front in bold strokes. She didn't explain it, just said, "There's a reason they called you a mistake. And it's not what you think." I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I looked back toward the grand hall. My mother was crying now, real tears for once. My father looked like a building without scaffolding sagging under the weight. My brother was pale, jaw clenched like he couldn't decide whether to fight or flee. And me, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like something had cracked wide open, but the real wound was still deeper. "I thought today was the end," I whispered. Serafina stood still beside me, silent. But maybe it's just the beginning, because whatever was in that envelope, I knew it would rewrite the story again. And this time, the truth might hurt worse than the lies ever did. Winning in public didn't stop my body from replaying the slap. Back in Chicago, alone in the penthouse, I still heard the laughter from the ballroom. The pain wasn't the hit itself, it was my mother's silence and my brother's choice to look away. Within a day, the Lockharts moved fast. A polished apology hit the press, carefully blaming me for disrupting the wedding. Blaine sent cease and desist letters, threatened defamation, demanded silence. They weren't seeking peace. They were racing the clock. Tessa made it clear why. There was a legal deadline coming: board, votes, asset transfers, documents that required my signature. The envelope they'd tried to force on me at the reception wasn't about family, it was leverage. That night I opened the sealed file Serafina had given me. Inside were hospital records, adoption papers, correspondence timelines. Eden wasn't my biological mother. I'd been taken as an infant from a teenage girl named Rowan Weller. The process hadn't been clean. Influence had been used, records altered, my origin erased. I wasn't raised out of love. I was acquired. Worse, the documents explained the pattern. Beau was the chosen heir. I was the contingency, the name on paper when optics or legal structure required it, the one who could be cut loose once my purpose was served. That was why they needed me humiliated, then compliant. That was why the Holloways were involved. The marriage wasn't just a union. It was a transaction, and I was the loose end. If the adoption ever came under review, my father faced more than embarrassment. That was the fear I'd seen in his eyes when Serafina arrived. Serafina asked me one question: "What do you want this to end with?" I didn't want apologies. I wanted truth and a line that couldn't be crossed again. Together with Tessa, I filed everything: civil claims for abuse and defamation motions to unseal adoption records, evidence of coercion footage from the wedding. Not for money, for finality. As we left the courthouse, Tessa's phone buzzed. "They've received the filings." Minutes later, Serafina told me the board had been called and Beau's authority was under review. The wedding meant to erase me had become the day they signed their own collapse. Serafina looked at me and asked softly, "Do you want to meet Rowan?" For the first time, I understood the difference between being a mistake and being taken. I said yes. There were no cameras in Taos, just a quiet road, dry air, and a small flower shop that smelled like soil and lavender. Serafina stayed a step behind me, letting the moment be mine. When I saw Rowan, I didn't need proof. I recognized myself in her eyes. We didn't say much at first. She told me how she'd tried to find me, how doors had closed, how money and power had silenced her. I believed her because she looked at me without expectation. No debt. No conditions. For the first time, family felt simple. I realized then that the Lockharts hadn't defined me. They'd only delayed me. Whether I kept the name or not, I no longer belonged to their story. Back east, consequences landed. Beau was stripped of control to calm investors. The threats stopped once the evidence held. Any attempt by my parents to negotiate was met with the same answer: the restraining order stayed. There would be no staged reconciliation. Serafina completed the last symbolic act. She bought the Lockhart estate, the house where silence had been enforced and fear normalized, and handed the decision to me. I didn't keep it as a trophy. I turned it into something else, a place for young people aging out of foster care, and for those escaping violent homes. A house that would never demand gratitude for shelter. Letters came. My father's apology arrived too late. I didn't respond. My mother sent flowers. I gave them away. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. One evening with Serafina and Rowan beside me, the past finally went quiet. Freedom didn't come from watching them fall. It came from no longer waiting for their permission to exist. They called me a mistake, so I'd spend my life asking to stay. The day they struck me in public, they gave me the proof I needed to walk away and write my own name into the future. They said I was a mistake, a shadow, a backup plan. But now I see it clearly, none of that was ever about me. It was about control, about power, about silencing someone before they could understand their own worth. And for years I played right into their hands. I tried harder. I stayed quiet. I carried guilt that was never mine to hold. I tried to earn love that should have been unconditional. But the moment I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come, everything changed. If there's one thing this story left me with, it's this. Sometimes the cruelest part isn't the blow itself, it's the silence around it. The room that laughs, the eyes that look away, the people who choose comfort over truth. And when we talk about family, maybe what we're really talking about is where we're allowed to be human, without having to earn the right to belong. What happened to me didn't turn me into someone who hates. It just made me stop negotiating with pain. It made me see that boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. And that kindness doesn't mean staying where you're being broken. If this hit something in you, if you've ever felt small in a place you were supposed to feel safe, I hope you leave here with one quiet thought: you're not too much. You were just carrying too much alone. And before you go, if you want, leave a few lines in the comments. Just a hi, or where you're listening from, or whatever you feel ready to share. I read them, and I know I'm not the only one who needs that kind of connection. If you'd like to be part of a space where we listen first and speak when we're ready, you can subscribe softly, no pressure, just as a way of joining this little community of stories. Thanks for spending your time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.